Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to trace exactly how a distant naval blockade in the Persian Gulf is about to dramatically inflate the cost of your daily groceries. We're going to make sense of this massive geopolitical shock by following just one single everyday item, a simple loaf of bread. We'll track its journey from the soil where the wheat is grown, across the oceans, and finally to the kitchen table, revealing how the hidden costs of war basically infiltrate every single step of the global supply chain.
So let's dive right into this micro to macro journey. We really have to ask, how on earth does a naval blockade in the Gulf actually raise the price of your bread? I mean, at first glance, the two seem entirely disconnected, right? Yet, a geopolitical conflict happening literally thousands of miles away is currently acting like this invisible tax on your morning toast. The war isn't being fought on your dinner table just yet, but as the research warns us, give it about 3 months.
And that's because this dynamic acts as what's called a delayed fuse weapon. See, the disruptions to crucial agricultural inputs actually started back in February with the chaos in the Gulf. Now, it's May 2026, and farmers in the Northern Hemisphere are making absolutely critical planting decisions for their wheat and corn based on those already disrupted inputs. But the real detonation of this crisis? Yeah, that won't happen until the July to October harvest. The disruptions we're seeing right now are going to inevitably blow up into a severe food affordability crisis in just 3 to 6 months.
To really understand the price of that bread, we have to start at the very beginning of its life cycle. Section 1, the farm, and the fertilizer squeeze. We need to look right at the soil and the vital fertilizers required to even grow the wheat in the first place.
Okay, so the global fertilizer market relies super heavily on nitrogen, which comes directly from natural gas. And the Gulf states, places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, they are the world's absolute largest exporters of urea and ammonia, which are these nitrogen-based fertilizers derived from that gas. So, when the Hormuz disruption jacks up global liquid natural gas prices, it sets off an inescapable chain reaction. Boom! Higher gas prices immediately spike the production costs for urea and ammonia. That directly inflates overall farming costs, which basically guarantees that food prices are going to surge. It's totally unavoidable.
Think about the farmers making planting decisions today. They are facing a brutal double squeeze. Because the price of urea has been climbing so much since February, they're completely backed into a corner. They either have to eat those higher input costs by paying completely exorbitant prices for the fertilizer they desperately need, or they compensate by using way less fertilizer and just planting fewer crops entirely. And honestly, both choices drastically reduce the overall harvest yield. So come harvest time, markets are getting hit with a 1-2 punch, higher input costs and lower supply.
Now that our wheat is finally harvested, let's move to Section 2, the transit and the cost of transport. Getting that grain from the farm to the processing plant and eventually across the ocean has suddenly become incredibly expensive.
Remember, food commodities like wheat, rice, corn, and cooking oil move in massive quantities by ship, and shipping costs for these bulk commodities have literally doubled on some routes. Why? Well, vessels are actively avoiding conflict zones by taking these massive, super costly detours all the way around Africa. On top of that, you've got heavy, hidden war risk premiums totally inflating insurance costs. Throw in severe port congestion that ruins turnaround times, and you get massive volatility in global shipping demand, which is tracked by the Baltic Dry Index. All of these logistical nightmares just pile heavy, hidden transit costs right onto our loaf of bread before it ever even sees a bakery.
But wait, the transit costs don't stop at the ocean. We also have to factor in this concept of embedded energy. This is the cost of the oil required to transport, process, and store literally every single calorie of food consumed. With oil sitting above $100 a barrel right now due to the conflict, expensive fuel infiltrates every single link in the chain. We are talking about the diesel for the farmer's tractor, the fuel for the delivery trucks, the bunker fuel for those giant cargo ships, and the massive amounts of energy required for food processing and cold storage. Honestly, every calorie you eat right now has the price of oil baked right into it.
Finally, our incredibly expensive loaf of bread reaches its final destination. Section 3, the table and the Global South's empty plate. The crazy thing is, the impact of these surging prices won't actually hit Western supermarkets first. The reality is that it's going to devastate the Global South.
The extreme vulnerability of these nations is just stark. For context, Egypt imports over 60% of its wheat. Tons of countries in sub-Saharan Africa rely on imported food for 30 to 50% of their total daily calories. And the Philippines? They import nearly 100% of their wheat and most of their cooking oil. These nations generally don't have strategic food reserves sitting around, and they definitely don't have the fiscal space in their budgets to suddenly start subsidizing skyrocketing grocery costs. So their populations are left completely exposed to the shock of our highly inflated loaf of bread. And if we look back at 2008 and 2022, we see a really severe historical precedent for this exact scenario. When governments are forced into a corner, when they have to choose between letting their people go hungry or borrowing money they simply cannot repay, the results are disastrous. Back in 2008, a global food price spike led directly to food riots in over 30 countries. In 2022, the price spike from the Ukraine war destabilized governments all across the developing world. It turns out, the economics of a single loaf of bread basically dictate national security.
So what's the forecast here? It's incredibly clear. Because of that delayed fuse of agricultural planting and harvesting we talked about, the true impact is hitting later this year. When the July to October 2026 harvest arrives, major cities across the global south, places like Cairo, Jakarta, Lagos, Manila, Dhaka, and Nairobi, they are going to bear the absolute brunt of this economic shock. An affordability crisis is locking in right now, today, and it is directly traceable back to the disruptions in the Gulf.
I want to leave you with this stark reality from the research to ponder. These cities are, quote, where the war is felt in bread prices, not missiles. We followed a single loaf of bread from the fertilizer and the dirt across heavily taxed shipping lanes straight to the tables of the world's most vulnerable populations. It really forces us to ask, just how fragile is our entire global supply chain if a distant conflict's heaviest toll isn't measured in military terms, but in the completely unaffordable cost of a family's daily meal? Thank you for watching The Explainer. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you next time.